Each week we check the temperature of the property market on a Monday night. Peter O'Malley is the principal with Harris Partners Real Estate, so he knows what's going on. Peter, good evening to you.
Good evening, John.
All right, well, let's look at the auction clearances over the weekend, because in Sydney particularly and Melbourne, those clearance rates were still very high, although off pretty low numbers.
Yeah, there was 171 sales reported for the Sydney auction market, John. What I found interesting in just taking a forensic look at those numbers is about half of them were sold prior. So with the King's long weekend, birthday weekend happening, a lot of vendors took the early money and didn't actually sell under the hammer. They sold prior to auction. But still, a 75% clearance rate on reported numbers is a good outcome any day of the week.
Yeah, and similar numbers in Melbourne, lower clearance rate in Brisbane, but the numbers in Brisbane are always lower than the other cities?
Brisbane's not as strong an auction market as what Sydney and Melbourne are, John. They've got slightly different rules there around pricing, and the agents tend to negotiate more transactions than they do under the hammer.
Just on this, because each week we talk about this and we see what's happening, and obviously with a long weekend in many parts of Australia, you're going to have things a little slower. But what's your take? Because if you were someone who was either looking at investing, buying, selling, at the moment you're getting a lot of mixed messages about where things might be in the next 6 months.
The lack of stock on the market in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane is distorting everything, John. So seller supply is not meeting buyer demand. That's not to say it's a strong property market. So there's contradictions everywhere in the property market at the moment, where for all intents and purposes you would think prices should be falling, but because there's no supply, those buyers that are in the market are inadvertently driving prices up, and clearance rates for that matter.
Yeah. So when interest rates go up, we had it last week again, and they're talking about more interest rates down the track. But when it actually happens, do you see a tangible response in the market in the weeks after that?
Not every time, but we certainly did after the last one. I'm not sure why the market was so surprised. Many people convinced themselves, John, that the RBA would be on pause, on hold for June, but the inflation rate is nowhere near where he wants it. And Philip Lowe is sending the message that if he has to break things in the economy to reset the inflation reading, that's what he's going to do. And I don't think people will be so keen to sort of bet against Philip Lowe going forward, because his language has been very strong. I think in hindsight, Philip Lowe may regret that month. I think it was April where he paused. In hindsight, he probably should have gone again then, because since that pause in April, where it looked like he was going a little bit soft on rates, the property market in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane for that quarter has rebounded quite decisively, and that's a nightmare scenario for the RBA.
Yeah, it is. You in your business would talk about this in the way we do as well, about the fact that there isn't enough housing at the moment. We've got more people coming into the country. What we can do about this, forget the short term. You can't just create a whole lot of houses in the short term or even the medium term. So what are your thoughts on this? Because the New South Wales government's trying to do, they're trying to target property developers to try to raise funds to then convince councils to do more and cut the red tape. What's your thought on that one?
Look, they're trying, so we've got to give them a tick for that. Chris Minns has clearly said that Sydney should go up and not out. You get the sense that the previous government were happy for a new street to be built in Western Sydney each week, whereas Chris Minns wants to probably see an apartment block go up in the middle of Sydney each week, if you can believe the messaging that's coming out. Local councils will need to give up or be stripped of powers for development control if the state government are going to get up on their agenda, John. And then the other thing I'd say is anything that pushes prices up for developers is simply going to be paid for by the consumer at the end. So yes, you can get more supply to the market, but if it's not affordable housing, developers won't build and buyers won't buy.
And we've talked about this before, this notion that we've got people coming onto a different interest rate. This is an ongoing conversation. The people who are going to go off the fixed rates and go onto the variable rates. Do you have a thought on that? Do your people around the place, do they get a view on that as well?
What I'm hearing from agents across the country on this one, John, is that people are not saying I'm under mortgage stress, therefore I'll put the family home on the market. They're cutting back expenses clearly, as we can see that consumer confidence has dropped to the lowest level since December 1990, according to the Roy Morgan poll. But furthermore, we're seeing a lot of people sell off investment properties, and the equity that's in that investment property they're putting back against their home loan. So that's a trend that a lot of people didn't foresee. They thought mortgage stress goes up, people will sell the family home, but that's not what's happening. So far, in the early stages of this, people are selling off their investment properties to free up the equity and reduce debt levels.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the family home is I guess the last bastion, really, isn't it? The last thing you want to sell.
As it should be. So I think this is a really good sign for the economy. It's understandable, and it's a smart play by landlords that are moving equity from investments into the family home. And hopefully the RBA can engineer a soft landing here. It's not going to be easy for them. They've only got a narrow path. But there is so much wealth in Australia, and our economy is still very robust. So they've got a chance to engineer that soft landing that we all want to see and bring inflation down at the same time.
Yeah, but the bottom line, I guess we can say this, we've said it every week around the country, your people have got many more people who want to buy than stock to sell them.
That's the perennial challenge for the government at all levels, and I'm not seeing a dynamic solution out there from any of them. I do like, in theory, this going up and not out from the New South Wales state government, but local councils need to partake.
Yeah, and then there are people who are going to live near the places that are going up, who they're the ones who voice their concerns to the local council. So it's a fascinating conundrum, this, but it's something we're going to be talking about for a long time to come. I really appreciate your insight on this holiday Monday night in New South Wales. It's different, of course. We have holidays in different parts of Australia. Queensland's a normal working day. Peter, great to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
Yeah, Peter O'Malley, he's the principal there of Harris Partners Real Estate.